Thank you very much. We are here at the 2024 Leadership Elections Hustings event run by Felix, IC Radio and the Imperial College Union. I'm joined here by Camille and Chelsea Stubbs, who are both running to be next year's union president. And we will be having a debate that will run for approximately 20 minutes. Then we'll have a short break and the other officer trustees will be back on. The format will be both candidates will have a minute of protected time to lay out their stall, say who they are, their experience. And after that, I will ask questions and encourage both candidates to explain, to demonstrate to you, the listeners, what makes them special and what should earn them their vote. So we flipped a coin, and Camille has got the dubious honour of being the first candidate. So I will start the timer and hand over to you, Camille. Go for it.
Hi guys, so my name is Camille. I am the current union president and running for a second term. A bit of background about me: I was an undergrad here at Imperial. I did 4 years of aero in the Faculty of Engineering and graduated last June. Whilst an undergrad, I was an avid member of multiple societies, including netball, where I was the president 1 year, snow sports, where I ran 2 of the trips, and women's rugby, where I was a member and committee member. Since being union president, I had 4 goals, and 3 are very much on track. My biggest achievement this year was probably reconvening the socially responsible investment strategy group, which is looking at divesting from fossil fuels as a university, which is something that I pledged to do.
Thank you very much, Camille. And handing over to you now, Chelsea.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Chelsea Stubbs, and I'm a 5th-year medical student here at Imperial, so I haven't graduated yet. I've got a year left, and I'm running to be your union president. My experience, so from my very first year, I've been involved in clubs and societies. In my second year, I took up a departmental role within the Medical Education Society. I've also been actively involved in many other academic societies, namely Surgical Society, Muslim Medics. However, in the latter years, I've branched out into IC, and I've taken on a few other activities which I find more fun, which I encourage you to do, namely cheerleading and boat. And why I think you should vote for me. Essentially, given my experience in leadership and the broad range of persons I've interacted with throughout the years, and societies I've interacted with throughout the years, I believe I'd be the best candidate to represent your views going forward. Thank you.
Thank you to both candidates. I think you've both talked about who you are, but obviously you're both running to be the president of a major institution. I'll throw the question to both of you. What is the role of a student union in 2024? What should it aim to achieve?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first, sure. So the role of any student union in any year, I'd say, is to represent the students, and that's something that I'm really keen on. I'm very passionate about advocacy and ensuring that there's representation and that all peoples are heard. The role of a student union in 2024 is essentially to keep up with the changes that we're seeing and ensuring that students aren't left behind. So I believe that, for example, here at Imperial, we're seeing a lot of changes, most recently with the logo and strategies and changes to leadership. I think students shouldn't be left behind in certain changes, and students should be at the forefront of any changes that impacts their academic experience here.
Yeah, I think Chelsea's spot on. First and foremost, I think she said this, but the student union is about representation, and that's a representation of 24,000 members, but obviously you can't do it alone. And so a core part of being union president is being able to bring the whole union together so that you best represent all the students. So that includes working with the deputy presidents, obviously that's a given, but also the permanent staff and drawing really on their expertise.
That's the role you're talking about, but what is a union? And Chelsea, you talked about advocacy. Who are you advocating to? Who are you advocating for, and who are you talking to advance students' interests?
Sorry, yeah, you're right. The union you're advocating on behalf of the students to the college, first and foremost. But it's also external facing. A union in isolation doesn't go very far. You have to work with other student unions. You need to share good practice. I mean, it's the same across all sectors, but student unions, I think, have a tendency to work in silo, and actually they're most effective when they're working together, which was part of my work this year, drawing all the London youth student unions together. Created something called the London Student Assembly, where we can share best practice, but also ahead of the mayor elections, the general elections, sort of bring forward to the forefront decision making what students want in London, more importantly, to the mayor.
Do you have any response to that, Chelsea?
So I commend any initiatives that bring students together and bring different perspectives to the table. So I really commend you on that, Camille, in establishing that association. I think it is important to get input from outside of Imperial. We don't work in isolation. Camille mentioned staff, and of course we are external facing. We are representing the university to the world. And we're upholding our reputation in that right, essentially. I think that considering that this union now exists, as union president, I would further the strides made in a positive direction. And coming back to the question, I would ensure that students, again, from all backgrounds, students from fresher to, let's say, for most courses, 4th year, medicine 6th year, a few other courses 7th year, 8th year, are represented. I'm in touch with a lot of students across faculties and grades. I love people. I'm very comfortable talking to people, and I really would be so happy for anyone to approach me about any issues that they have.
Thank you very much. You touched on the job, and Camille, I'd come back to you about this job of the union president. I think a lot of our listeners, even though they are students, maybe find the role somewhat opaque. Would you both be willing, Camille, if you go first, talk a little bit about what you think, what the job and the role of the president is?
I'd definitely say there's multiple faces to the role. I think there's an element of trying to maintain like a stakeholder relationship with the college, not only the college, but mainly. The union, this is applicable to all unions, but the union doesn't exist without the college's finance. So there's an element of you need to respect that relationship, but there's also an element of you represent the students, and that's who elects you, and so that takes precedence over how you decide what to bring to the college and when you try and argue for change, which they welcome, by the way, some more than others, but they want to be. They're very out of touch, I think, with what the student body actually needs and wants, and often look to the student union as that representation voice to feed from. Which sort of brings me to the role of the student union president. It's representative, but you also definitely need an ear to the ground. I mean, Chelsea alluded to this earlier, but the need to be in touch with the student body and not just the people that maybe you were friends with when you were when I was a student, but also the more people on all sides of scales and extremities, difficulties. There are things you're not even aware of when you're just a regular student that you then become aware of when you... Sorry, am I talking for too?
No. I'm encouraging you to wrap. Yeah. Chelsea, you were talking about wanting to be approachable. Obviously, you would be the CEO of a very large organisation. What does the role entail, and what would you do in that role?
Right. So just bouncing off of what Camille said, I think it's a bit disappointing that we don't have more candidates running. I don't know, I'm a bit competitive. I was hoping to have more voices, to hear more ideas to think about and bounce off of. So I think, that we need more communication on the side of the union about what a person in this role actually does.
Sorry, but what do you think it does?
Right. What I think it does. So as I mentioned, advocacy on the part of students, listening to students and voicing their views to faculty. You're also making quite tough decisions, I would say, and ensuring that there's a sense of unity on campus. I think these are crucial in any leadership role. You're also learning. So when you step into a new role, of course, you have ideas about how you'd like to change things.
Such as?
Yeah, right. So as I mentioned in my manifesto and in the interview earlier, I like to increase financial protection for students in CSPs, ensure integration in CSPs, building on the Give It a Go program, and ensure minimum standards of inclusivity and core activities and mobility prospects after college.
So you would welcome more union input and intervention in CSPs?
Most definitely. Obviously, this would be from a least restrictive angle. I believe in student expression and maintaining that diversity. I think that diversity is great and is one of the reasons that we attract so many brilliant students to Imperial.
Okay. Terry, would you like to pick up on anything, or should we move on to the next question?
I just wanted to say one thing I think is really important for the role. So obviously you're elected with a mandate or manifesto, but I think it's really important to stay open to what the student body really wants. Maybe you missed something in your... I mentioned this in my interview, but as an undergrad had just no idea what it's like to be a postgrad at Imperial. I think you'd be too quick to think, oh, they're just a bit older and otherwise the whole experience is the same. But they have their own set of struggles and difficulties that they need support with. And so I think through my role this year was a lot more in touch with that. And that's why I've chosen to feed off a postgrad student brought to Union Council this year about the London allowance for PhD students just not having increased in the last 30 years, which is just something I just didn't know about, embarrassingly so actually. And so that's why I've chosen to take that on if I'm re-elected, because it's not necessarily something I would have cared or been exposed to as an undergrad when I was here, but something that you are exposed to when you're in a position of responsibility and represent a more diverse group of people.
Thank you very much. This is maybe picking up on what you've been saying. I think some students fear that the union has got too close to the college and has thus lost its ability to oppose it. What would you both think about that view?
I'll go first, if that's all right.
Sure.
Yeah. I can resonate with that sentiment, having been at Imperial for 5 years, having seen the changes, having seen the terms of past presidents. I believe this last term has been a step in the right direction. And I can empathize with the fear that students might have that the union works for the college, it's not working for me. Personally, I have engaged as much as possible with union processes to ensure that my voice is heard in any decisions that are made about student experience, different focus groups, incentivized by pizza, for example. And sorry, how we can tackle that, I think using a ground-up approach, I believe an increase in exposure of the union team to students would be helpful. Increasing our presence on the ground.
How would you do that?
Right, so at the moment we have pictures of our current union team around campus. This was not present previously. I believe including union staff in, for example, help desk activities, introducing activities that help you to get to know your elected members, and helping students to see them as people just like them that got into a great university that are also passionate about leadership and want to make positive changes for them. I think that would be great and would really help with that idea that students might have.
Sure. Camille?
Yes, I touched on this earlier about the need for this balance between a working relationship with the college, so where there's respect between stakeholders, but also this, I think I said earlier, precedent that is that you advocate for students, and that's who your members are, that's who elects you. There is this need of balance, otherwise you go too far one way and the college just doesn't want to work with the union and we can't push through any change. Too far the other way and you're just not being an advocate for the students. And so I think from my experience, it really depends on who you elect, and I think to the listeners and to the voters, it's really important that you have confidence in that person that you're electing, that they will stand up for the students, and that they won't just, how do I put this politely, just go with the flow, and because that is arguably like easier to just nod and say yes, but you're there as it's a political role and you're trying to make a difference, so you need to rub people the wrong way sometimes for a better outcome. And I'd say that's something I've really tried to channel this year. I mean, the Imperial is the last of 2 Russell groups to still invest in fossil fuels. It is indirect, granted, but it's still an investment. And opening that question up, college staff are really, I mean, we're a STEM university, we work a lot with oil and gas companies, and it's a really difficult question to broach. And I think that's just one example of I feel like that was in my manifesto, that's what I was elected for, I feel the student community cares about, that I've gone ahead and tried to make a difference about that, even though the college's most senior staff are very against it.
You bring this up, and this brings us to the next question, is that British student unionism, as you say, has a rich tradition of sort of internationalism and expressing political views very forthrightly and advocating for political positions. Do both of you think that the union should hold political positions on international affairs, so Israel-Palestine, or politics, so divestment? Camille, you just spoke, so Chelsea, do you want to have a comment on that?
Thank you for the question. It's not something I had considered very deeply. However, I believe that the current stance is possibly working. You mentioned the Israel-Palestine conflict. I know that many students around campus have been expressing their views. For example, I graduated from my IBSc last year, and there were students expressing their views on the stage as well. And I feel that ensuring that students feel able to express their views is important, and so we should uphold that as a union. In terms of taking political stances, I believe the current approach of encouraging diversity in views is the one that we should continue. I wouldn't advocate for anything that stifles the views of students.
So the union should not take a view, should not express a position?
I would say not.
No. Camille?
I would agree. I think, arguably for universities, but more importantly for unions, the role is to represent all students. And in that student body, you're going to have different opinions. So as soon as the union takes a stance on something that's controversial and divisive, you no longer represent all students. You no longer represent all your members, and you're no longer doing what the union is, the charitable objective, which is to represent students.
But is not divestment a political position? I would argue, and I think it is a position of concern for students in fields like chemical engineering. So I'm a chemical engineer myself, or chemical engineering is the big one, but also in materials and mech eng, that work in fossil fuel companies that have traditionally worked very closely with Imperial is now opportunities being cut off because of this disengagement.
It's not disengagement, though. I think this is what I'm trying to differentiate with the college, is they've just published a social engagement piece on how they're planning to move forward with fossil fuel companies. Divesting from fossil fuels doesn't mean we stop working with them research-wise, because there's an engagement protocol for that now. What I'm trying to advocate for, and what I believe students want, is we have indirect divestment. Sorry, to Imperial's stance is we should engage for change, which I think is positive. They want to engage with oil and gas companies that are working towards the right net zero goals or decarbonising. To take a stance on that, I think is political because that's divisive, and that's a lot of people's research is like people have research grants from those companies, and I think that's divisive. To be tackling divestment, which has nothing to do with the students, it's to do with the endowment, it's to do where Imperial's getting, where it's investing its money.
And generating returns that students will benefit from.
How do you know that students are benefiting from those returns?
Well, I mean, we use the buildings, don't we? We use the.
But it's not like if you don't invest in these companies, you're losing money. You just reinvest the money elsewhere, which is having a better social impact, which I would argue makes for a prouder student community. If you know that your university is not investing in companies that are not doing good in the world.
Chelsea?
I appreciate Camille's discourse on fossil fuels. It is a pressing issue. Of course, you'd know more about this having been in the role and engaging with college on this. So I appreciate your views on that. I also appreciate what you said about not having a position being a position. I believe as a world's leading institution, we should be empowering students to be leaders in whatever field they're in. Be that engaging with fossil fuel companies or engaging with, we have a school of public health, healthcare in war zones, for example. I said I'm passionate about advocacy and standing up for students. Last year, I saw an opportunity to really work with a society. So I'm currently the president of the Model United Nations Society. And most recently, we attended the London International Model United Nations, which is attended by students from all over the world. It's the largest MUN in Europe. And we debate political issues. And I'm getting to the point here. Yeah. Essentially, throughout the year, I had been training STEM students to put forward their own views, and I'm very proud to say that we won 3 awards at this conference. But
putting forward your views is the point of a union is for collective action. The point of a union is that together, as a united body, we are stronger than individuals speaking up. Mm-hmm. I referred to the attempt that happened. It was 3 or 4 years ago now, of the discussion of a rent strike, and it was felt that actually not only was this harmful, but also that actually the union was no longer able to achieve collective action because of this fear about not being divisive. Do you think that students can still all work together to achieve a goal?
I think it's obviously a very complicated, there's not one right answer, but I mean, in my experience of the role this year, the one thing that sort of shines through is the union should be protecting students' freedom of speech. And there are about to be like very important laws that are going to pass about student unions impeding on this. And I think taking stances, you run that risk of making your members feel like they can't have a certain view, and that in some light is taking away their freedom of speech. So I don't know if this answers really your question, but I do think that a union its more important role is to make sure that students can say what they want as long as it's lawful, and creating the space for them to do that.
Chelsea?
I would agree, and I would simply add that the pessimistic answer is never the correct answer. So I believe that collective action, whatever that looks like, is always something that we should be striving for. There's always a way.
Okay. Well, we'll ask the final question and then wrap up, which is simply what is the biggest problem facing, in your view, facing students at the moment? And how would you aim to address it? Chelsea.
Sure. So, facing students, as a student myself, I'm well placed to answer this. There are a number of problems. I would say the biggest problem would probably be the cost of living crisis. I touched on this in my interview earlier, but I believe this is something that has possibly taken students blindly and may have set them back in their studies. I know a few students that have had to take up different jobs, and obviously this takes away time from their studies and possibly the quality of work they're able to produce at this institution. How I would tackle it, as I said, considering a two-pronged approach, short-term and long-term. Short-term, essentially focusing on personal factors around students. So why is it that we're not able to access different food items on campus? How can we improve financial skills? How can we utilize the facilities that we already have, student-based or college-based, to empower students to take more control over this and have more positive outcomes? Long-term, this would require more engagement with the college to improve the facilities that we already have, and looking at how we are funding the meals that we have on campus and how we are funding different activities. I mentioned CSPs quite a lot in my manifesto, and it's because I believe CSPs are very important for student engagement with the union and for their life after college, and seeing how we can financially protect students, as I said, in their engagement with CSPs, so that they can continue their university lives as best as we can possibly do so as a union.
Okay, thank you very much. Camille, over to you.
It's always a question I really have difficulty answering, because I think depending on what type of student you are, you do have different immediate issues. But I would say, I think I agree with Chelsea that the cost of living doesn't discriminate between postgrad, undergrad, masters, and especially in London. And it was a huge reason behind which I chose to advocate for postgrads and their London allowance this year. Imperial is quite, I'd say this relative to other universities, generous in their bursary provision, but it's still not enough. And I think it's the biggest barrier to students really excelling at university. It's obviously not specific to Imperial at all, but I think it is specific to London universities, or more so than others. And yeah, I think there needs to be, more transparency, and it needs to be articulated in clearer terms to the college exactly which sort of students are affected, and where with their help we can make the most impact, because I don't think the union can do it alone.
Okay, thank you very much. That was the Imperial College Union Union Leadership Election Debate 2024. We will say thank you to both of our candidates who came today, and we will now go for a short break and then return with the Deputy President interviews. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, Callum.